Lonely cowboy shelters boy and grandma. They turn out to be the richest family in the territory. Cole Rivers rode through the empty expanse of the frontier planet, his worn boots kicking up the dust beneath his horse. The wind howled across the barren land, carrying with it the scent of the desert and the promise of solitude. He was a man who sought peace, far from the noise of civilization. Out here on the edge of the planet's desert, there was no one but himself. His ranch was modest, a cabin tucked away in a small valley, surrounded by the wild beauty of the land. The stars above twinkled like forgotten diamonds, offering a calming silence each night. Cole had always loved the quiet. He wasn't a man of many words. In fact, he rarely spoke to anyone at all. Most days he worked his land alone, repairing fences, checking cattle, and making sure his cabin remained sturdy against the unpredictable weather of New Haven. But tonight was different. As a storm rolled in, dark clouds filled the sky, and the wind began to pick up. Cole could feel the storm coming from miles away. He saddled his horse and decided to check on the nearby trail. He knew that in storms like these, travelers often lost their way. That's when he heard the faint sound of a voice in the distance. It was a cry for help, barely audible over the sound of the wind. His instincts kicked in. Without hesitation, Cole urged his horse into a gallop, heading toward the sound. It wasn't long before he saw them, a small group huddled beneath a rock outcropping. An old woman, her hair gray and tangled, sat beside a young boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. The boy looked up at Cole with wide eyes, his face pale from exhaustion. "Are you lost?" Cole called out, his voice carrying across the storm. The old woman looked up, her expression weary but grateful. "We've been stranded for hours," she said, her voice weak. "Our transport crashed. My grandson, he's sick." Cole quickly dismounted, his eyes scanning the area. The boy's face was flushed with fever and his breathing was shallow. It was clear they needed help, and fast. "I can take you to my place," Cole said, his voice firm. "It's not far. You can stay there until the storm passes." The old woman nodded gratefully, and Cole lifted the boy onto his horse with ease. The woman followed, struggling to keep up, but Cole didn't mind. He was used to traveling alone, but the presence of others, even strangers, was a welcome change. By the time they reached Cole's cabin, the storm had worsened. The rain poured in sheets, and the wind howled like an angry beast. Cole led the horse into the barn and quickly set about caring for the boy. He made a small fire in the hearth and boiled water for tea, hoping to bring the boy's fever down. "Thank you," the old woman said softly. Her eyes filled with gratitude as she watched Cole work. "We didn't expect to find anyone out here." "I'm Edna, and this is my grandson, Liam." "Cole Rivers," he replied, his tone curt. "You'll be safe here for the night." As the storm raged outside, Cole tended to the boy, wiping his brow and offering him small sips of water. Edna sat quietly by the fire, her hands folded in her lap, staring into the flames. For a while, the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the wind howling outside. Eventually, Cole turned to Edna. "You said your transport crashed. What were you two doing out here? This land is remote, not many pass through." Edna hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "I used to work in the scientific field. I was researching something important, something that could change the course of things here on New Haven. But we were followed, chased."
"The crash wasn't an accident."
Cole frowned. He had heard of people being pursued for various reasons, fame, fortune, or even revenge, but he wasn't interested in getting involved in something that didn't concern him. Still, something about Edna's tone told him there was more to the story. "You're safe for now," Cole said, his eyes scanning the room as he prepared another blanket for the boy. "But you're welcome to stay until the storm passes. I'll keep an eye on him." Edna nodded. "Thank you. Liam's mother passed away a few years ago, and I've been taking care of him ever since. He's special, you know. Not like other boys." Cole's eyebrow raised at her words, but he said nothing. He had heard many strange things over the years, and this didn't sound all that unusual. The frontier was filled with people who had unusual talents, but that didn't concern him. He had enough to worry about on his own. As the hours passed, the storm slowly died down, leaving behind a quiet, eerie calm. Cole sat by the fire, keeping an eye on Liam. The boy's fever had broken, and his breathing had steadied. Cole was relieved, but there was still something that nagged at him. Edna had mentioned that Liam was special, and there was something about the boy that didn't sit right with him. His eyes, though tired and sick, were unnaturally bright. His movements, though weak, were strangely deliberate. Cole couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this family than they were letting on, but for now, Cole didn't push. He wasn't one to pry into the lives of others, especially not when they were in his care. He had offered them shelter, and he would honor that promise until the storm had passed and they were ready to move on. As Cole settled down for the night, the wind outside had quieted, leaving only the faint rustling of the trees. He couldn't help but wonder what the future held for these two travelers. They had come into his life unexpectedly, and Cole had always known that life on the frontier had a way of changing things without warning. Tomorrow, when the sun rose, he would see what the next day would bring. For now, though, he allowed himself a rare moment of rest, listening to the crackling fire and the peaceful sounds of the cabin. The morning after the storm, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the land. The winds had calmed, and the air smelled fresh, carrying the promise of a new day. Cole Rivers woke early, as he always did, the faint rays of the sun filtering through the small window of his cabin. His horse, Dusty, stood outside the barn, chewing on some hay, his steady rhythm almost like the heartbeat of the ranch. Inside the cabin, Edna had already risen, her face softer with the rest. She sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around a mug of hot tea. The boy, Liam, was still asleep, curled up on the couch by the hearth, his face pale but no longer feverish. Cole moved quietly around the cabin, doing his usual morning chores. He kept to himself, but his thoughts kept returning to the night before. There was something about Edna and Liam that didn't quite add up. He could sense it in the way they looked at each other, the way Edna seemed to carefully choose her words, as if she were hiding something. And then there was Liam, so quiet, so thoughtful, yet somehow different. His eyes held a wisdom far beyond his years, and Cole found himself wondering what kind of family they were. After a while, Liam stirred. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice hoarse but steady. "You feeling better?" Cole asked, offering the boy a gentle smile. Liam nodded, though his gaze flickered toward Edna, as if waiting for her approval. "I'm all right," Liam said, his voice more certain now. He pushed himself off the couch and stood stretching his arms. "Thank you for helping me last night." Cole didn't say anything at first. He had always been a man of few words, preferring actions to speeches, but he could see that Liam was strong, despite his sickness. "You're welcome. You're lucky you made it through that storm," Cole said. "You two must have been heading somewhere important, huh?" Edna glanced up from her tea, her eyes narrowing slightly. "We were traveling. I was studying something, looking for something hidden here on New Haven. Something old." Cole's interest piqued at the mention of something hidden. He didn't ask more about it, though. If they wanted to share, they would. After a moment, he finished his breakfast in silence, wondering what kind of research could bring a scientist like Edna to such a desolate place. After breakfast, they decided to pack up and continue on their way. The storm had cleared, but the road ahead was still uncertain. Cole offered to guide them to a safer part of the territory, where they could find shelter and a way to get back on track. But as they prepared to leave, Edna hesitated, her gaze turning toward the horizon. "You don't have to do this," she said, almost as though she were speaking to herself. "But there's something I think you should know." Cole stopped packing the saddlebags and turned to face her. "What's that?" Edna stood up, moving toward him. "Liam, he's not like other children. He's special, you see. He's not just my grandson. He's a key to something much larger than either of us can understand." Cole frowned. "A key to what?" Edna's eyes seemed to cloud over with memories, but she quickly masked them. "I've spent my life studying ancient civilizations, the ones that lived before us. And what I found, what I've uncovered, it could change everything." "Change what?" Cole asked, his voice steady but his curiosity growing. "New Haven," Edna said, her voice low. "It's not just a desert planet. There are secrets buried beneath the surface. Technologies, artifacts, powerful things that no one should ever possess. And Liam is the one who can unlock them." Cole's brow furrowed, his mind racing. He had heard stories about people searching for hidden treasures or ancient technologies, but this felt different. He didn't know why, but he could sense the truth in Edna's words. There was something about Liam that had always felt otherworldly, something beyond the boy's innocent demeanor. "You're telling me that Liam can unlock these secrets?" Cole asked. Edna nodded. "He doesn't fully understand it yet, but he has a connection to something ancient, something powerful. We were being pursued because of it. People will stop at nothing to get what's buried here." Cole stood there for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. He had always known that New Haven was a harsh place, but he never imagined it could hold such mysteries beneath its dry surface. He looked at Liam, who was staring out the window as though he knew his life had just changed forever. "So, what do you want from me?" Cole asked, his tone not unkind but serious. Edna gave him a steady look, her gaze unwavering. "I need your help, Cole. We can't do this alone. We're being hunted, and we can't run forever. But you know this land better than anyone. You know how to survive." Cole thought for a moment, weighing his options. He wasn't a man who sought trouble. In fact, he had always avoided it. But something about Edna's words stirred a sense of duty in him. He didn't know why, but he felt like this was his fight too now. "I'll help," he said after a long silence, "but you're going to have to tell me everything. No more secrets." Edna nodded. "I will. And I promise you won't regret this." The decision was made. That afternoon, they saddled their horses and began the journey toward the old mining facility that Edna had mentioned. It was a long ride, and the further they traveled, the more Cole could feel the tension building. Every rustling leaf, every distant sound seemed to make them all uneasy. They weren't alone anymore. As they neared the abandoned mining settlement, Edna finally revealed more about the ancient technology hidden there. The artifact, she explained, is a relic of a civilization long gone. It holds the power to control resources that could change the balance of power here on New Haven. Liam, who had been quiet the entire ride, finally spoke. "I don't know how I can help," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "You will, Liam," Edna said softly. "You're the key." Cole could only nod as they reached the entrance to the mining facility. The adventure they were about to embark on would change everything. The sun hung high over the abandoned mining facility, its harsh light casting long shadows across the barren land. The wind had picked up again, whistling through the broken walls of the old structure which had once been a bustling place filled with miners and laborers. Now it stood silent, a relic of the past, its darkened doors and crumbling stonework a reminder of the planet's forgotten history. Cole Rivers rode in first, his horse steady and sure beneath him. Edna followed closely behind, her eyes scanning the area with a sharpness that spoke of years spent in the field, searching for things others had missed. Liam, the young boy who had seemed so fragile just days ago, rode quietly behind her. He was different now, his eyes more focused, his posture straighter. It was as if the journey had awakened something within him. Cole couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far larger than they understood. The closer they got to the mining facility, the more the air seemed to hum with tension. It was as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When they reached the main entrance, Edna dismounted first, her boots hitting the dusty ground with a quiet thud. She looked up at the massive iron doors, rusted with age, and took a deep breath. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "The artifact lies somewhere beneath us, hidden deep in the tunnels." "But we're not the only ones looking for it. They know we're here." Cole frowned. "Who's after you? And why?" Edna glanced over at him, her eyes shadowed with concern. "There are people, powerful people, who want the artifact. It's not just about riches or technology. It's about control. Whoever holds the artifact can control everything. And Liam is the one who can unlock it." Liam shifted nervously in the saddle. "I don't know how to do that," he said quietly. "I've never seen the artifact. I don't even know where it is." Edna turned to him, her expression softening. "You don't have to understand it yet, Liam. You're connected to it in ways we can't explain. Trust me, it will come to you." Cole glanced at the boy, seeing the uncertainty in his eyes. He had his doubts too. But Edna seemed so certain, and the more Cole thought about it, the more he realized there was no turning back now. They had come too far. "We'll figure it out," Cole said, more to himself than anyone else. "But we need to stay alert. We don't know who's out there." They entered the facility cautiously, their boots echoing off the walls as they made their way deeper into the darkness. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of rust and decay. The remnants of mining equipment lay scattered about, half buried in dust. Old tools, rusted tracks, and broken machinery. Nothing seemed to have moved in years. As they moved through the maze of hallways and chambers, Cole couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every creak of the floor, every distant clang made his heart race a little faster.
But he didn't voice his concerns. He knew they were all feeling the same unease.
Finally, they reached a large chamber at the center of the facility. The walls here were lined with strange symbols, ancient carvings that Cole didn't recognize. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. The room itself seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and the air was thick with the weight of something long hidden. "This is it," Edna said softly. She stepped forward, her hand reaching out to trace one of the symbols. The artifact is somewhere beneath this room. I just know it. Liam stepped forward as well, his eyes wide as he looked around. But how do we find it? Edna turned to him. You'll know. When the time comes, you'll know. Cole wasn't sure what she meant, but he had learned to trust Edna's instincts. She had been right about everything so far. He stood back, keeping a careful watch on their surroundings as Edna began to search the room for any clues. Liam, however, had a far more intense look in his eyes. It was almost as if something inside him was awakening. Suddenly, Liam stepped forward, his eyes fixed on a section of the floor that seemed no different from the rest. He knelt down, pressing his hand to the cold stone. To Cole's surprise, the floor shifted slightly beneath the boy's touch. "Liam, wait!" Edna called out, but it was too late. The floor began to move, revealing a hidden staircase leading down into the darkness. Without hesitation, Liam stood and stepped forward as though he had known the exact moment to move. Edna followed him closely, her face a mixture of hope and fear. Cole hesitated for only a moment before following them down into the shadows. The staircase was narrow, and the air grew colder the further they descended. It was as though they were moving into a forgotten world, a place where time had stood still. The further they went, the more Cole could feel the weight of the artifact's power, like a silent presence lurking just out of reach. Finally, they reached a small chamber at the bottom of the stairs. It was dark, save for a faint glow that emanated from a pedestal at the far end of the room. As they approached, Cole could see the shape of the artifact, an intricately carved stone covered in strange markings resting atop the pedestal. Liam stepped forward once more, his hand reaching out as though drawn to the stone. As his fingers brushed against the surface, a surge of energy pulsed through the room. The air hummed, and for a moment everything seemed to stop. "What's happening?" Cole asked, his voice tight with apprehension. It's beginning," Edna whispered, her eyes locked on the boy. "Liam, you did it. You unlocked it." Liam's hand remained on the stone, his face a mask of concentration. "I don't understand. What's going on?" The markings on the stone began to glow brighter, casting an eerie light around the room. Suddenly the walls of the chamber began to shift, and the floor trembled beneath their feet. "We need to get out of here," Cole said urgently. But before anyone could react, a loud crash echoed from above. The entrance to the chamber was blocked, and the only way out was forward. Edna looked around, panic flashing across her face. "They're here! They found us." Cole's heart raced as he drew his gun, ready for whatever might come through the door. But Liam, his hand still on the stone, looked up with wide eyes. "They're coming," he whispered. Cole didn't know what was happening, but it was clear that the artifact was more than just a tool. It was a weapon, and Liam had just unlocked it. The air was thick with tension. The stone in Liam's hands pulsed with an energy that was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. As the walls trembled, a deep hum reverberated through the room, and the strange markings on the artifact grew brighter. The stone seemed to respond to Liam's touch, glowing with a power that Cole had never seen before. "We need to move now," Cole shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. But Liam didn't budge. His eyes were locked on the artifact, his hand steady as he continued to touch the glowing stone. It was as though the boy was in a trance, drawn into a connection with the object far deeper than anyone could understand. "Liam," Edna called, her voice filled with both concern and wonder. "You have to pull back. The artifact is too powerful." But Liam was unresponsive. His gaze was distant, and his fingers seemed to fuse with the stone, as though he were part of it. The ground beneath them shook once more, and a deep rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. It was as though something massive was awakening deep within the planet itself. Cole's instincts screamed at him to act. "We can't stay here," he insisted, stepping forward to pull Liam away from the pedestal. But just as his hand reached out, the boy's eyes snapped open. They were no longer the eyes of a child. They were sharp, focused, and filled with an understanding far beyond his years. "I can't leave it," Liam said softly, his voice calm yet powerful. It's my purpose." Cole stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The boy was no longer just a sick child. He was something more, something that could change everything. And just as quickly as the rumbling began, it stopped. The artifact's glow dimmed, and the chamber fell silent. For a moment no one spoke. The tension in the room was palpable, and even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Cole could hear the faint sound of footsteps from above, moving closer. They weren't alone anymore. They had been followed. "We have to move," Edna whispered urgently, her face pale. "They've found us, the corporate men. They'll stop at nothing to take it from us." Cole's heart pounded in his chest. He had known they were being hunted, but now it was no longer just about survival. The stakes had been raised. They were no longer just running. They were fighting for the future of New Haven itself. He turned to Liam, his eyes filled with concern. "Liam, can you stop them? Can you control it?" Liam nodded slowly, his fingers still resting on the artifact. "I think I can," he said, his voice quiet but certain. "I can unlock its power. But it's not just for me, it's for everyone." Before Cole could ask anything more, the ground shook again, louder this time, as if the very earth was waking up. The ceiling above them began to crack, and dust fell from the walls. It was clear that the artifact's power had stirred something far beyond their understanding. "They're coming," Edna said, fear creeping into her voice. "We have to stop them before they get here." Cole drew his gun, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way out. They couldn't leave the facility, not with the artifact still in play. But they couldn't stay either, not with Redstone's men on their tail. "Liam," Cole said, his voice steady despite the chaos, "what do we need to do to make sure they don't get the artifact?" Liam looked up at him, his eyes glowing with a strange light. "We need to activate the vault beneath the facility. It will lock the artifact away, protecting it from anyone who tries to take it."
But it will also activate the defense system?
"The defense system?" Cole asked, confused. Liam nodded. "It's part of the artifact's design. If it's threatened, it will protect itself and everyone around it." Edna stepped forward, her face etched with determination. "We can't waste time. If we don't activate the vault, Redstone's men will take the artifact, and they'll use it to control everything." Cole turned to Liam. "Where's the vault?" Liam pointed toward a door at the far end of the chamber, hidden behind a wall of rubble. "Through there. But be careful. Once it's activated, there's no going back." Without hesitation, Cole moved toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he trusted Liam. He had to. The trio moved quickly, pushing aside debris and making their way into the next chamber. The air was thick with dust, and every step felt like it echoed through the entire facility. They reached the vault door, a massive metal construct covered in the same strange symbols that had adorned the walls of the first chamber. Liam stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Are you ready?" he asked. Cole nodded. "Do it." Liam placed his hand on the door, and immediately the symbols began to glow. The ground shook again, and the hum returned, louder this time, as if the very earth itself was coming alive. The door slowly creaked open, revealing a dark passage that led deep underground. "We don't have much time," Edna said, urgency in her voice. "Once it opens, the facility will lock down." Cole turned to Liam. "We need to make sure it's secure. Don't let anyone through." Liam nodded again, his expression intense. "I can do it." As the door swung open, they stepped inside. The walls here were lined with more of the strange carvings, and the air felt heavier, almost charged with energy. At the far end of the room, the artifact rested on a pedestal, surrounded by an energy field that flickered like lightning. "This is it," Edna whispered. "The vault is connected to the artifact's power. Once we lock it away, no one will be able to touch it." Liam stepped forward, his hand reaching out once more. The air around him seemed to shimmer as he activated the vault's locking mechanism. There was a loud, mechanical sound as the vault began to close, sealing the artifact away from the outside world. Suddenly, the walls trembled as the facility went into lockdown. The once stable ground shifted violently, and a loud alarm blared, signaling the arrival of Redstone's men. "We're running out of time!" Cole shouted. "We need to get out of here." As the vault sealed, the door behind them slammed shut, trapping them inside. The lights flickered, and the room became eerily silent. For a moment, all Cole could hear was the pounding of his own heart. "We're safe, for now," Edna said, her voice filled with relief. Cole looked at Liam, who stood silent but resolute. The boy had just saved them all, and possibly the entire territory. They had uncovered the power to change the future of New Haven, and now it was in their hands. Cole felt the weight of the moment. The lonely cowboy had become part of something much larger. The artifact's power was locked away, and with it, a new future for the people of New Haven had begun. And for the first time, Cole knew his life would never be the same.